We have rarely had this many people in the meeting, so it's fabulous to see everybody here. What we're going to do is we have what's called a public hearing. And then after the public hearing, if there's time, we'll have a regular planning board meeting. But the public hearing is an opportunity for the public to listen to the Nature's Wilderness Resorts proposal. We'll have questions and answers. I ask that, for some folks, this is an emotional issue. Try to keep your emotions in check, and it helps, getting your point across. We will most likely start with an explanation of the project by some of the principals from Nature's Wilderness, and then we'll open it up for questions. So let's give them a chance to at least explain the project, and then I'll kind of say, all right, do we have questions? We're the planning board. So for some folks I haven't seen before, my name is David Strock. I'm from North Baldwin or East Baldwin after we lost our post office over on the Merch Road area. Why doesn't everybody just kind of introduce themselves and say where you're from in town?
My name is Matt Fricker, and my wife Janet and I live down the Deacons Road by Sanborn Pond.
I'm Joe Pierce. I live on the Senator Black Road.
I'm Nickel Ernst. I live on New Road, and I'm typing because I got elected secretary once, but I wasn't here.
I'm Sue Olson, and our house is on Senator Black Road.
Just so everybody knows, behind you, in your backs, is a camera. These meetings are recorded, both video and audio. The louder you keep your voice up, the better it picks up the audio. But I like to remind people of that because typically you're on your best conduct when you're on camera. I also remind you because the meetings are posted online, so if you miss something during this meeting, don't feel like you have to, feverishly take notes because there is a video recording as well as Nichols 15 minutes, but they're more summary fashion. Any questions about what we're about to do, just generally? We're pretty casual. This isn't too formal. So, we also have the selectmen here. I think all three selectmen are here. Why don't you raise your hands just in case somebody voted for you, so I figured I know who you are. We also have the code enforcement officer, known as the CEO, not the chief executive officer, but the code enforcement officer. Wes, when you raise your hand, great. And we also have Lee J. Feldman here, who is a hand raise. Come on in, there's Steve, come on in. You gotta come up here in front, though. I hope you're front row people.
Oh, yeah.
It's all good, don't worry. Mr. Feldman is a consultant that the board has hired at the expense of the applicant to help us understand some of the issues involved. Mr. Feldman has experience in these types of projects, and so he's helping us understand some of the details that, we're all volunteers. We don't do this for a living, whereas Mr. Feldman does. So he's been very helpful throughout the process. I wanted to say a couple of things. I have notes, but I'll be quicker than this. This project, the Nature's Wilderness Project, is at map 7, lot 22. I think most of you are here because you know where it is, but it's right off Senator Black Road, about a mile up Senator Black, 3/4 of a mile? Yeah. It's the old Marston's family camp, right off Marston's Road. Nature's Wilderness is owned by an individual named Scott Efron. I think he's in Florida right now. He's
in New York
in New York right now. Jerry Brown is,
Gary Brown.
Gary Brown, sorry, I'm reading it. Gary Brown is, their representative, as well as,
Oh, Jeff Amos.
Jeff Amos. Amos?
Amos is fine.
Amos, yeah. They have a long history here with the board. Our first contact with Nature's Wilderness was back in March of 2016. They came to us, Scott Efron, a lawyer, and another guy, wanting to talk to us about building a campground over on Marston, around Marston Pond. They didn't even own the property at the time. They just wanted to know if they could buy the road so they could secure access to the road. Or put a gate at the corner of Senator Black Road and Marston Pond Road. We obviously said no to Town Road, but we must not have deterred them very much because Scott bought the property about a month later. Through the summer of '16, there was a lot of work on the property by Mr. Efron. There were some disagreements with the town in 2016. Stop work order and some other disagreements. But we didn't see a conditional use permit application until October 2016. I'm not going to throw a lot of dates at you, but I just want you to understand this has been with us for a long time. And so this meeting is a culmination of several years of work on our part as well as the applicant's part. That first application was rejected out of hand because it was completely incomplete, and we rejected it. There's a second one that came in a year later. It was also incomplete, but we at least started working with the applicant. Gary and Jeff got involved somewhere around January of '18, so it kind of just languished for 2 years. In January of '18, Gary and Jeff got involved, and things changed quite a bit. Things started to come together. We had a lot more productive conversations. The project was slowed quite a bit because there was a DEP revegetation order where they had disturbed some lands around the wetlands, and they had to revegetate the property, and so things slowed down a little bit. To the point where, and this is kind of an important issue to the board at least, in February 2018, Gary Brown came before the board and said that Scott Efron was kind of tired of dealing with the board, and he wanted to consider a subdivision for 80 lots for low-income housing. And that kind of put us back, like, what are we dealing with here? Are we dealing with a campground or a subdivision? Some additional information came in through 2018. We got the town lawyer involved to understand the difference between a campground and a subdivision, because there's not as much difference as you think, right? If somebody has a campground and somebody lives there 24/7, 365 days a year, it's a lot like a subdivision. So we wanted to understand what the difference was. We're kind of through 2018, and we got into 2019, and we finally got what we thought was to a place where March of 2019. So we started back in March of 2016. So we're 3 years later, 2019. There were 6 items that they had to provide to do a complete application. And we waited for those 6 items, and they didn't come. All through the summer of 2019, they didn't come. There were some issues in 2019 that concerned the town with regard to the property, some rather loud activities. And we kept wondering, where's the conditional use permit application? And it really wasn't until September of this year that the applicant came back and said, okay, we're going to do we're gonna do a final permit. We're gonna put everything together, and we got a final permit, what's the date of this thing? October 23rd, is it?
Sounds about right.
October 31st. We got a final, clean, done, everything together permit, and application, sorry, permit application. We scheduled a site walk, which happened, first week of December, and the next step is to have a public hearing. And I apologize if I went through all that, if there was too much information there, but I wanted to be very clear that we've been talking about this for a long time. And we've been very frustrated throughout the process, and some of it may have been our slowness, some of it may have been the applicant, but I just wanted you guys to know this is not, this has been a while. And so I know some of you are on the sidewalk. What you do on the sidewalk is you look at the property and you see what's on the property, see what they expect to do. And that was pretty productive. There was a little bit of snow on the ground, but I think we still were able to see 99% of what I was interested in seeing. And so then we're here today with the applicant's opportunity to present the application. Preliminary thoughts before the applicant goes. Does anybody on the board have anything that they want to convey of the same kind of nature? That's why I'm the chair. I have to talk. So why don't I?
Such a good job.
Ah, thanks, man.
I want to recuse myself before you get to the applicant.
Yeah. So let's go to the. I'll turn it over to Jeff and Gary, and at the same time, let the record reflect that. Joe Pierce is voluntarily recusing himself, and that just means that so we talked about sides of the table. This side of the table is the board, that side of the table is the public. You get to do a little bit more out there, and Joe's choosing to do a little bit more out there. So, he doesn't even have to give us a reason, haven't asked. So, Jeff, go yours.
My name is Jeff Amos. I'm an engineer with a company called Terranine Consultants. We are civil engineers. We do road design and environmental permitting and stormwater design. I've been hired by the applicant to design and permit the remainder of the Nature's Wilderness Campground. As the chairman discussed, this has been a lengthy process. Before I was involved, I understand that the project really revolved around 250 sites around an area that first to key you in. This is on the bottom here is Marston's Road. Senator Black Road is off over here. This is Marston's Pond. This is Upper Twain Road, and here is Deacon Road. So originally the applicant had 250 sites located in this area here, and some right up around Upper Pond. We've been, going to, as the chairman said, back and forth with the board, and early this spring, we decided to take a hard look at the whole design and kind of use the land that was available, and we added in this portion out here. So the reason why it took so long this summer was we were really doing a full-fledged redesign of the entire project. Now this project features approximately 300 sites, maximum 300 sites, located around the ring and inside formed by Upper Twain Road all the way through and down to Deacon Road. So for those that were on the sidewalk, as you know, you see there's the existing camp right up here. This area down here, that's all open right now. It'll have a primary parking area. It'll have a fairly good-sized swimming pool, a clubhouse and restaurant area for the patrons to use. All services on site are only available for campground from there, there are a series of old tote roads and trails that will be, tent sites, with a few cabins in this area right here. But then once we get around and up into the new area here, this is all, going to be generally RV sites. The applicant may decide to put some tenting sites there, and some small cabins, but for stormwater purposes, the largest site that they have will be their large RV site. So we've designed, each one of these and assumed the largest possible, impact. What that does is it makes sure that all of our stormwater pipes, all of our buffers, all the level spreaders are sized to the maximum degree, and so what's gonna be there will be something less than that. So DEP and engineers involved, believe that what will be built will be more than what's gonna be needed, from a stormwater perspective, once it's built. All the roads going through are all 18 feet wide, including everything right through here, all the new infrastructure. 18 feet wide with a 5-to-1 side slope on a narrow shoulder, so a typical ditch slope is 3-to-1. That's considered somewhat drivable, but 5-to-1 is a 20% slope. You can certainly, if two folks come opposite directions, first of all, 18 feet is wide enough to pass, but someone could pull off. In addition to that, we have a series of 10-foot wide pull-offs, about every 500 feet. If there is someone coming, and folks don't want to feel just too close, they can pull off. There's a series of, state regulations require that there are bathroom and laundry facilities within 500 feet of all campsites. And so we have a whole series of small bathroom and laundry facilities located at various points.
Come on in, this should be.
At various points throughout the project. Stormwater-wise, this, kind of the existing side over there, drains down a fairly steep hill. This is all maybe 25% grade, coming down the hill over here. It'll be collected in a fairly large, ditch on the road. And then come to this point here, there'll be a new swale that leads down to a large stormwater pond that's located in this area down here. That stormwater pond is designed for DEP criteria, to hold a certain amount for basically water quality, purposes. DEP has determined in their infinite wisdom how much water you need to store in order for the sediments to fall out, so that basically water leaving the pond, is considered treated and clean. That water will then, flow, through the existing large culvert underneath Marston's Road down here, flow into Marston's Pond. One piece of stormwater design, is something called the stream protection volume. That's used to treat thermal impacts to downstream water bodies. For those that have, know the area, Marston's Pond is 2 to 3 feet deep, over the whole thing. So DEP has agreed that it doesn't make any sense to put, a thermal impact, feature on the pond here. Instead, we're gonna put it downstream, right on Marston's Pond, right by the dam. And what that is basically, it's a bench, cut into the ground where water will flow into, some rocks and through an under drain, that will cool the water, and will flow into the downstream, the stream, right downstream of the dam. And that will actually rehabilitate the stream that's there now. So everything flowing out in the summertime from Marston's Pond is almost like bath water. It's well into the 80-degree temperature most of the summertime, and so that will be taken care of and treated by the stormwater bench that we're putting in at the bottom. The new stormwater pond that you're building on this side over here will also double as a fire protection pond. So a typical fire pond has about 120,000 gallons available. This pond has more than 1 million gallons. It's far in excess of a typical fire pond. There'll be what's called a dry hydrant located right along Marston's Road with a pull-off. A dry hydrant is a standpipe, all designed per federal regulations. That pipe goes into the pond, into a suction screen near the bottom, and then the fire truck can come on and hook up to it, and fill up with water and go and use it for fire protection purposes, through the campground and the rest of the town. Additionally, this has been reviewed by the fire department and fire and rescue folks, One of the things they wanted, one thing that benefit for protection-wise, these are wide roads for a campground, with the pull-offs. All the new portions over here are generally, 8% or less road grade. So that's within, a town design standard for town road. So they're all, easily navigable, and easy to get through. If you notice internally, once the campers are on site, they can remain on site in the internal, network, without having to go onto Marston's Road. Water. So as I mentioned, this whole side here goes to a stormwater pond on this side. The remaining of all the new area, will basically go into a whole series of level spreaders and stormwater buffers. Stormwater buffer, in this case, all it really is a deed restricted forested area that isn't allowed to be cut. So these buffers, again, meet certain DEP criteria based upon slope and the underlying soil type. So we've had a soil scientist go out here, dig test pits over the whole, all over the place, determine the soil type of these buffers, make sure they meet DEP criteria. And it's hard to see on this plan, but there's a whole series, basically every few hundred feet, there'll be a culvert that goes down to what's called a level spreader. A level spreader is a shallow kind of stormwater impoundment that is of level elevation. Water goes in and fills up and then spreads out over kind of a wide area, so it stays in what's called sheet flow. Once it's in sheet flow, water can go and hit the small micro topography, the micro pools, and give a chance to infiltrate, and through that, stormwater is treated. So DEP is very favorable of, the more buffers you can get, the better, as far as they're concerned. So this entire side goes through stormwater buffers. There's a whole series, either adjacent to the road, or like I said, through a culvert, through a small ditch, and then to a level spreader. This project, due to the size, will require what's called a Maine Department of Environmental Protection site location permit. That's the DEP's largest permit that they have. Goes through the permit application, which will be here at the town when we submit, about 3 inches thick. Goes through everything from stormwater analysis to erosion control to, we've had to contact the inland fisheries and the natural areas program. And really everyone under the Department of Environmental Protection gets a chance to look at it and comment on the permit. Another thing, permit that's required is the Maine Department of Transportation traffic movement permit. Because this project has a certain number of trips, we'll be required to get that permit. And in a bit, I'll let Bill come up, but Bill Bray is here with me tonight. He's with Traffic Solutions. He's a very respected traffic engineer, and he's been involved in this project. So beyond that, let's see, we have, just kind of going through the features. So we have there's a series of small, amenities they're gonna have. There's a volleyball court here. They have, like I said, the pool, the clubhouse. There's a small, a restaurant on-site, eatery thing here. And then there's also a series of walking trails and ATV trails. These trails are proposed to stay within campground land. We provided a map. Once the campground is open, the renters will be provided with a list of rules, long list of rules they're allowed to do on the campground, as well as trail maps. Per planning board request, we've agreed to, at the property extents, there'll be signage letting hikers and bikers and ATV users know the extent of the property and at the point where they have to turn around and circle back up. So all trails will be looping in nature, so there'll be no one will be heading out at that end and have to turn around. It'll be very easy to stay on the campground. There are several hundred acres here, so most renters will be very satisfied staying on the 400 acres or so defined, on this side of Marston's Road. As I mentioned, the board during this process has asked us to put together a whole series of campground rules and really make clear hours of operation and what check in, check out, what they're allowed to bring, those kind of things. So those are all available for review in the application that's here at the town, that's, you guys can come and look at that. And I think with that, I'll call up, Bill Bray, he's gonna talk about the DOT traffic movement permit, and once he's finished, we're happy to answer any questions that, either the board or audience folk, would have.
Excuse me, thank you, Jeff. I'm Bill Bray with Traffic Solutions. I've been working on the project. I've been working on the project for a little over a year and a half, but mostly the heaviest extent of the work has been over the last 6 months. Just wanted to try to provide an overview of what Jeff described as the traffic movement permit application. It's a state regulation, and again, by regulation, we're required to place a copy of this application in the town, which was delivered to the town for anyone that wanted to review it. So I'll just kind of go through some of the highlights of that document. There is a described process that the Maine Department of Transportation applies to all permit applications. And again, we've done a number of these, and we feel very confident that we've complied with those conditions. One of the first steps that we did was determine how many trips this will generate during the peak hours of a day. We always look at traffic in the very worst hours of every day, because if we are confident that if we deal with the worst case condition on an hourly basis, then any other hour during the day would be able to be accommodated within the system. We've used standard trip rates. Again, we're required to use those that are published in what's referred to as the Institute of Transportation's Trip Generation publication. I'm also required to use what's called the 7th edition. There is today actually a 10th edition, but I'm required to use the 7th edition in estimating the trips for any development project. Maine DOT requires any project that generates more than 100 trips in any hour of any day of the week to file and receive a traffic movement permit. Based on Land Use Code 416, which is defined as a campground recreational vehicle park in this noted document, the project is expected to generate 111 trips during the evening peak hour of a weekday and 165 trips during the peak hour of a Saturday, which is generally the peak day for the folks coming and leaving a campground.
So what constitutes a trip?
A trip is, there's two ways to explain it. I'll try to take the easier. A trip is if I'm going to the grocery stores. When I leave my house to the grocery store is one trip. When I return from the grocery store to my home is a second trip. So a trip is a one-directional movement from one place to another place.
So trips for the campground would be the number of times people, 111 times means that during an hour in the evening, there would be 111 trips in or out combined.
That's correct, combined, a total of 111. It could be divided up occasionally, depending on what happens during the directional of the time of day. You may have 60% of it that's coming in and 40% of it that's leaving.
Now, is that just within the campground onto Marston Road or Brown Road, or is it from the campground out Marston Road to Senator Black Road?
These trip projections are based on trips that are generated internally or externally to the campground that are either coming to the campground from external places, such as Route 13, Route 5, or Senator Black Road, or the reverse trip of people going in the other direction. So it is an internal to an external or an external to internal trip. Again, as I stated, Maine DOT requires the applicant to file for and receive a referred to as a traffic movement permit for the project. We filed this application with Maine DOT on December the 3rd. The next steps in this process is that Maine DOT will schedule what's called a project scoping meeting. They will notify the town, and obviously any resident or anyone is welcome to attend. And if they choose to make comments, then those comments are received by DOT. My experience would tell me that DOT, during that scoping meeting, will in fact require the performance of a detailed traffic study. I am very confident that they will in fact require that. They will define the scope of that traffic study during this scoping meeting. I expect them to schedule the scoping meeting probably either just before the new year or slightly after the new year turns, that they will actually schedule that. Once I have completed the traffic study, then I will turn that in to MDOT. They will review it, make additional comments or ask for further information. And once they're satisfied with the content of that, they will prepare a draft permit and submit that for review by both the applicant and the town. And generally that takes at least another 90 days before we would have a signed traffic movement permit. And that would be the earliest point that we would have a permit. I'm just going to provide a little bit more information on some of the information that was included in this application. Again, one of the components of the application is that we're required to look at the roadway safety conditions for a general study area of the project. We determined, or we have assumed, that the logical definition of that study area was to include the full length of Senator Black Road and the section of Main 113 between both ending intersections of Senator Black Road. We requested the latest 3-year traffic safety data from Maine DOT, which is for the years 2016 through 18 for those road segments. That report shows that there was 0 accidents along Senator Black Road during those latest 3-year time period. And along State Route 13, there were no identified high crash locations, and I'll explain what a high crash location is in a minute. Maine DOT considers any location, whether it's an intersection or a road segment, a high crash location, if there are 8 or more accidents in 3 years and the critical rate factor exceeds 1. I'll just also provide a definition of what a critical rate factor is. Critical rate factor is simply a comparison of the studied area with a statewide average for a similar type of facility. So those 2 criteria have to be met to meet DOT's requirement for a high crash location. We've developed a preliminary traffic assignment of the trips coming into the site and the trips leaving the site during both peak hour conditions. In this document, there is 2 stick diagrams, which are referred to, that show presents the actual assignment of what we anticipate the traffic as they either enter or exit the site. And clearly this is something that could be discussed, and I'm sure each of us would have perhaps a different assignment percentages, but this is what I've selected as a preliminary assignment. I've assumed 40% of the trips would arrive to and from the east on State Route 113. Another 35% would come in from the west on 113. And then the remaining 25% would use State Route 5 coming up from the Saco region to the campground. Now again, we can certainly have a discussion later, and I have no problem with other folks' input, that perhaps these numbers are skewed one way, perhaps they should be skewed a little bit more the other. But again, this is a preliminary assignment, and we'll be fine-tuning that as we go through this process. We've conducted an evaluation of site distance at Marston Road and the intersection off of Twain Road. Assuming that Marston's Road will be signed at 25 miles an hour upon completion of the construction. It's required to have 200 feet of sight distance in each direction. Based on my review of it, it's easily over 300 feet looking in both directions at that intersection. DOT will also possibly could ask us to do further investigation of the road crash data. By the time we get to the permit process, actually the new data for 2017 through 19 will be available. Yes,
What
sir.
about the intersection, you talked about the intersection of Upper Twain and Marston for sight distance and things like that. What about the intersection of Marston Road and Senator Black Road?
I haven't actually taken measurements there, but as I was driving into the campground site and leaving, it's very obvious that there, at the very minimum, there is some clearing there in both directions that will need to happen coming out of Marston's out on the Senator Black to provide that distance along Marston's Road. We did not take those measurements, but as we continue in this process, we will definitely take that, and I've already noted that to the applicant, that we'll definitely have to address those issues.
Because I think I recall concerns or comments during the site walk about that particular intersection.
Well, we definitely will do those measurements, because again, everybody has to go in and out through that direction. So we need to make sure that the sight lines in fact do meet the safety standards. The other, and I'll finish up here in a second. The other thing that we will be required to do, we have done some preliminary work on it. We'll have to conduct what's called a left turn warrant study at each of these study intersections on the major road approaches to determine if a dedicated left turn lane might be required for vehicles queued up waiting to make the left turn into Senator Black Road. We've done some preliminary analysis on that based on some data we collected in 2017. That analysis indicated that a left turn lane was not required, but we've increased the project size plus the background traffic along 113 has certainly increased since 2017. And then there are obvious sleeper items that DOT will identify as we go through the permitting process that they will ask for additional study on. I think that I can go into a lot more detail, but I don't want to put people to sleep here this evening, and I certainly will try to answer any questions if it's appropriate.
So why don't we, thank you very much. Why don't we, start with the board. Do you have any questions of Mr. Bray, in terms of the traffic issues? And you guys get a chance in a second.
How do you determine the estimate of trips in and out of the campground? You talked about 111 and that. What do you base that on?
Again, that same ITE publication that I mentioned.
Yeah.
They provide the distribution rates of the distribution of site trips during each of the peak hours.
For campgrounds?
Yes, they do.
Oh.
Yeah, and that's what I use, which I'm required to use. Now, is there times when it will be a different rate? It could be, yes. But based on what's in that publication, that's what it's.
And can you also explain why you have to use version 7, but there's a version 10 that exists?
You really don't know the answer to that?
Well, I mean,
I'm only teasing.
Sounds like you're using like an old version of Windows.
Yeah, we pretty much are.
Yeah.
Actually, DOT, the state law for the state, I think it's 305 in the state statutes, requires the use of the 7th edition. When I have used the 10th edition on a number of projects that don't require a state permit, and actually most of the projects that I've worked on shows about a 15% reduction in trips if you use the 10th edition versus the 7th edition. And that's almost uniformly the number that I come up with on almost every development. But again, we're not allowed to do that. Now, there is a light at the end of the tunnel here. I've been working with other traffic engineers in the state with DOT, and they're proposing a complete rewrite of the traffic movement permit process, which will then allow us to use the most current edition of the trip generation publication as we develop trips, which will be, the appropriate way to approach these.
So I had a question. I noticed in the report, it says that the trip estimate for Saturday summer peak is 165 trips per hour.
That's correct.
So it's 165 cars going either to or from vehicles, going to or from.
Combined, yes.
What is the trip count today of that, of the traffic from, on Senator Black to 113? I mean, I think it's very minimal from Marston's Road to, but what is the background? What is our baseline today?
If you can just give me a couple seconds here, I'll, as I stated earlier, we collected traffic data out on, Senator Black Road, all, each of the three intersections at both, 113 and at Marston's Road in 2017. The east intersection during the weekday it has 4 vehicles coming out of Senator Black, two of them turn left, 2 of them turn right.
Okay.
And going back in at, during that same time period, you have a total of 8. 2 of them making a right turn and 6 of them making a left turn.
So you have 12
12 trips.
Yep.
That's 25.
Well, we haven't done
No,
the other
weekday,
side.
111,
We have to do the other side too, though, because
If
the
you go,
165 is both ends, would end up coming out one of
that's
the
correct.
2 ends of Senator Black. So
That's
what's the other trip count on,
All right, now, first of all, let me back up here a minute. I gave you the weekday. If you take the weekend or the Saturday time period, it's a little heavier.
Okay.
The Saturday is 12 and 11, 23 vehicles.
On both sides of Senator Black?
What about that?
No, I'm going to just the east intersection right
Okay.
now. Now, if you go down to the west intersection, I'm gonna add these up for you this time. You've got 19 total during the weekday,
Yeah.
and you've got 14 on a Saturday.
I'm sorry,
37 versus,
165.
so the 165 is just the campground generated trip.
That's correct.
So it'd be a total of about 200. 202 from 37.
The only thing I want to point out, if I could please, is that these traffic counts were collected during the month of October, 2017. I am highly confident that DOT will require me to redo those counts during the summertime, when volumes are typically the highest.
Okay.
But again, we started the project in September, so it's kind of hard to count the summer until you wait a whole year. So we just took the best, time we could do.
Yeah. I'm just trying to get a frame.
No.
I don't talk.
Okay, all right, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
it's just hard for me. It's the baseline of about 30 to 40 versus 200 or so. That's helpful for me to kind of understand the increase. And they're different vehicles because you don't have RVs. Now, I'm sure of the 37, most of those are probably single occupancy vehicles.
I would assume, yeah, because you don't, usually someone with an RV is gonna come in and set the camper on site and maybe stay for a longer period of time, whereas they may be just traveling back and forth with, a vehicle that they've towed with the camper or something, so.
So then the other question I had, so just one more question. So your study, only, assumed that the campground would operate as a campground and did not make any assumption for, what the traffic would look like if there was any sort of mass gathering, or other event on the campground that was not directly related to the campground activity.
I was not aware that there was gonna be any special events at the campground, so I based it on the number of proposed units or campsites in that campground.
based on the land use code 416.
That's correct,
Right.
yes, sir.
Okay, that's all I have.
If you have a special event, typically, those are handled in an isolated situation. If there is, then yes, you should evaluate that in some fashion, but they're not routinely part of the application. DOT requires an additional permit if you have 30 events during the year, 30 or more events where there are in fact special conditions.
Okay.
So you said, there was a scope hearing and then they would tell you what
Scoping
to do.
meetings.
And you said the soonest possible that then you could actually get a permit was 90 days, right? Earliest, but then you also just said that they're probably gonna ask you to look at summertime numbers.
Right.
So what's a reasonable estimate on when you might be able to obtain a permit?
My best guess right now is that we would probably get a permit sometime in the summer. Now, with this project being a phased project, they do not need a permit initially. Phase one, and I have it written down, I have it written in front of my face right now, but the number of units that are campsites that they're proposing in phase one does not require a traffic movement permit. And once we have the scoping meeting with DOT, we will in fact discuss that with them. But the applicant, as long as they have their DEP permits and local permits, they could in fact go in and build that portion of the project prior to the summer.
And as a board, that was something I think we learned a little bit about on the sidewalk, that there was somewhat defined plans for a phase process, that we hadn't really heard that before. And I'd be super interested in permitting in phases as well, but we could talk about that a little bit.
So you mentioned a number of things that still have to happen in terms of traffic studies, the sight line for Marston Road and Senator Black Roads, clearing may be needed, possible dedicated left turn lane, et cetera, et cetera. What's the timeline for really updating and completing and getting through everything in terms of the traffic impact study?
He said summer.
This summer?
I could clearly go up and down the ways of the site visit on the Black and Marston's Road. I don't wanna do it if there's, heavy windrows of snow at the intersection, because I really don't get a true measurement. I'm not afraid of the cold, so I can go out anytime as long as there's not snow on the ground. And I can measure that, and we could clearly show you that graphically, what needs to be done to provide adequate sight distance. Again, my feeling is that I can do parts of the traffic study now, actually, but I am very confident that DOT will not let me use data that I collected in 2017
Right.
to conduct that traffic study. So there's going to be a delay in that.
So David talked about, David talked about one thing that has given me some cognitive dissonance about the traffic study, and that is that the whole thing is based on vehicles, which is like cars or passenger trucks or something like that. Now, I agree that once people get in there, as long as their Class A has a tow vehicle, or they have a trailer that they're towing with a car or a truck, they'll be able to use a regular vehicle for going in and out. But at least a decent portion of the ingress and egress is going to be the campers. And these Class A campers are the size of buses. And Class B, I think, is like the size of a van. Class C are the ones with the truck engines and cabs in the front, and then the box in the back. They can be pretty big too. And I have a 30-foot trailer along with my F-150. It gets 40 feet long or so. So these are long, wide, somewhat difficult to handle, large turning radius it's like driving a battleship. And, I just, can't quite put together the idea of those, the recreational vehicles equating to a regular vehicle in a traffic study. Is there any insight that you have as to, how this traffic study, accounts for the logistical challenges of the actual size of RVs going in and out of a campground?
I'm glad you raised that issue because I actually misspoke when I described it as 100 vehicle trips per hour requires a permit. It's actually defined in the DOT regulations. It's passenger car equivalent trips. And generally, I would say that an RV, a large RV would be considered by DOT standards 2 passenger car equivalent trips. Now, however, when I do the analysis for example, determining whether a left turn lane is required, I'm still basing it on actual vehicles, not the size of the vehicle. When I do what's called a capacity analysis, which I'm evaluating the mobility and operations of an intersection, I in fact have to use a percentage value that you input into the program, the traffic model, that in fact considers the number or percentage of heavy vehicles through the intersection.
When you do this,
Yep.
I'd like you to consider one thing. I mean, I've taken out signs, I have ripped off my awning. So when you're taking a right-hand turn on like Senator Black Road, onto Marston's Road, you can't take that turn just like you would in a passenger vehicle, or the side and back end of your trailer will hit the trees and be in the ditch. I always have to like pull out into the other lane. You're doing a turn like that, and it's that maneuvering challenge that really needs to be incorporated into the sight vision and the need for a turn lane and stuff like that.
Well, they make a computer simulation model where we can actually track what a vehicle travel path is around the corner, and I think it would be very important. And I just behind me, I think it's something we could provide a visual. It's called auto turn, and you actually can simulate the turning radius of a certain type of vehicle. We could do that at the intersection of Marston's and Senator Black. And if in fact we need to widen those radiuses out so that people can come in and out, then I would suggest that we would provide that.
That seems to make sense. No more questions.
And that's something that's easily done. That's not something that's difficult. Yes, sir.
When you mentioned peak travel hours, particularly on the weekend, is it correct to assume that peak travel time would be like only 2 hours, and when like they're departing the camp, and actually traffic before would be building up, and after that would be diminishing and getting less traffic?
Yeah, what we did when we did the traffic count, and my assumption was that the peak on a Saturday, because that's the heaviest day, that peak hour, 1 hour time period, we were assuming would probably occur someplace between like 11 and 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And we actually did the counts during that time period. And based on that data, and again, I'm going on memory here, and that gets a little sketchy at times, but I'm pretty sure that on a Saturday, the peak hour occurs right around noontime. Now that's based on the traffic, the background traffic we counted on State Route 113.
So it can be assumed that it's a relatively brief time.
Yeah, it is.
About an hour.
But
I think
it
it's about
also,
an hour.
but it also diminishes a little bit in some cases on both sides of that peak hour.
Yep.
Okay.
All right, so
So I just wanna make sure I'm clear here. When you did the traffic, count study in 2017, you did not do a capacity analysis at that time.
Yes, we did,
Oh, you did?
we did,
Did
we
you give
did.
us those numbers today?
No, but it's in, I don't know if this was this submitted previously?
Yes.
Yes. In its traffic study, this is my original copy, was submitted, I don't know exactly the date of it, but I performed it in, I believe in late 2017. I will be honest with you, you don't have a capacity problem. You have other issues that need to be accounted for, but the intersections, the volume of traffic, and I just stated what the traffic is on, Senator Black Road, a very low volume roadway. And even 113, yeah, the rush going to Freiburg Fair, during Freiburg Fair week is busy. But for the rest of the year, you don't have the volumes that would end up generating a major capacity problem.
What about do you take into consideration the size of the road? I mean, Senator Black is not a huge road. You have two, Class A, vehicles, or even Marston's Road, two Class A vehicles. Do you worry, or do you consider the size of the road to make sure that these 165 trips can pass each other without any problem?
Well, I will look at it, but I guarantee you that Maine DOT will look at it in their review of this application.
But we haven't yet, I guess.
No, we haven't gotten to that point yet.
Because I guess our concern is that Marston's Road and frankly Senator Black, they're town roads. And so if the applicant is going to, if it needs to be improved because the applicant is doing something, it seems as though the town has an option to say no. Like, it doesn't seem like the town has to say yes. We want Senator Black to be expanded by 10 feet on each side. Is that true, or does the town have to say, yes, the applicant can pay to get that?
Well, truthfully, that's not my call, and I don't mean to sound disrespectful.
No.
That becomes the town's decision.
But that's what I mean, that's the town's decision
Well,
whether to
based
allow
on
it or
what,
not.
but I mean, DOT also, if they chose, could deny this permit.
Right,
I've never been involved, never heard of a permit that's been denied, but they actually have the legal authority to do that if they choose to.
okay. So why don't we open it up to comment? Now, I try my best, anybody who's been to town meeting knows, I try my best to get people, everybody, new voices get first pick up, but we'll try to raise your hand, and I'll acknowledge that you have your hand up, and then we'll try to get everybody, a chance to talk, either, to Mr. Bray, or to Mr. Amos, about anything about the project. Gary's here as well. I think you're willing to answer questions, aren't you?
Absolutely.
Yeah, as a representative for Nature's Wilderness. We have the selectmen in back, if you have questions about, selectmen stuff regarding this, and we have the CEO here, you can also ask questions of him. If you wanna say your name, you can, but you don't have to. All right, what we got? We got one.
So I've got, two questions to Mr. Gray and maybe one for Lee J. So I've got maybe a suggestion for you, Mr. Gray.
Okay, sir?
We have a campground in Standish, very close by.
Yep.
And anecdotally, when I drive by, I see most of the campers that come out take a left-hand turn. That's where the population center is. That's Boston, Portland, Bangalore. You go left. And so I would suggest that as that maybe you take a look at that traffic in the summer and you make your assignment based on that.
Very good idea, thank you. We'll do that, I promise you that.
Well, great. And left-hand turn lane. My concern on Senator Black Road is, I don't care about people getting off 113, that's their problem. My concern is, how do I get onto 113 when you've got 165 cars an hour? Because right now, I leave my driveway and you go down to the bottom of Senator Black Road, and you got a hill going up to the right, a hill going up to the left, 50-mile-per-hour speed limit, and I did see somebody once doing that, but, you know. And if I can see anybody in either direction, they're coming downhill at me. And, if I can see anybody, I don't go. You know, it's just, that's the sight distance. If I'm turning left, I can't accelerate up that hill, they're right on my bumper. And that's if I don't get hit by the guy who's coming from the left as I'm trying to look right to, you know, I mean, it's a tough intersection, in my opinion. I'm wondering how far backed up they're gonna be at 165 trips an hour. I'm going to guess that you're gonna find maybe 80% of the traffic coming from the campground is gonna be down at the foot of that hill on the easterly end and taking a left. That's my guess. So I'm thinking where you're gonna want some sort of left-hand turning lane, a roundabout, traffic lights, whatever it is. I'm suggesting that may be where something happens and why it happens. I mean, do you have any thoughts on that?
First of all, if, you know, again, I really do appreciate your idea of counting the campground down in Standish, because I think it would provide invaluable data for trying to perfect that assignment of trips more accurately. And if in fact there is a distortion where that the bulk of that cycle traffic is gonna come out of the east intersection of Senator Black, then yes, there is gonna be some delay getting out onto 113 during certain hours of the day. The one concern that I would have of putting perhaps a second lane on the Senator Black approach, it's, in an ideal world, it's a great thing to do, but there's also a concern that I have, a safety issue, that if I've got an RV sitting in the left turn lane, waiting to make the left turn, and you're in the right lane and wanting to go the other direction, you're gonna have a really, really hard time seeing that vehicle coming at 50 miles an hour.
That's it.
And, well, I'm being honest. So you know, there's a safety trade-off, and I would certainly rather see maybe accepting a little bit more delay and not try to put in that extra lane and have someone, you know, try to make that right turn and end up having a, you know, severe accident.
Then I'd be wondering about a traffic circle or a traffic light.
Traffic lights are something that, again, there are warrants that are federal warrants that have been adopted by the state of Maine, and traffic signals can only be installed under certain conditions, and that has to be based on traffic volume.
Okay.
And I can honestly tell you, I mean, I've been doing this work for almost 45 years now. I can honestly tell you that we could never find enough traffic at those intersections to warrant a traffic signal.
So
And I'm being dead honest. I'm confident in that answer.
no, that's great. I'm just trying to track this down.
Right.
So if there's a traffic backup on Senator Black Road.
Yep.
Too bad.
No, I don't think that's necessarily,
Right.
you know, there.
I
I think we need to look at it more closely, and if we do the analysis and it shows that we've got some issues there, then it's our obligation to provide some sort of a recommendation that kind of alleviates or manages that delay.
So
just, we gotta keep moving on now.
can I ask one more question? And this would be
Always one more question,
because that intersection, the land on all sides of it belongs to me. So I'm concerned if a turnout lane has to be constructed, can property be seized under eminent domain for this project?
The applicant wouldn't have the right to do that.
Right.
That can only be done by a state or municipal agency.
Right. Thank you.
And the one thing I want to add is that be assured that certainly the questions that you're asking are questions and issues that will be discussed with the DOT. and with, the applicant's representatives based on what they wanna see and what they think needs to be done for safety purposes as well, especially at 113. But, yes, the second part of your question, you did answer correctly.
Thank you.
Yeah, something.
I have a question for you too, on the 165 cars an hour. Everybody's kind of questioning that, and I am as well. Is that? But is that based on a complete turnover of a campground? You taking into consideration seasonal sites, people that are there?
No, that, again, those are average trip rates that are actually presented in that document that I referred to. That's what I have to use to generate the trips for this project. Now, again, when we count that, I can't remember the acres of something, right? The one that comes out, I know it was something like that. When I go down and do a count of that, if I can get from the owner how many sites were occupied during that count, I could recalibrate that trip generation rate and get a sense of whether we're pretty close or there's a gap. But, you know, again, those are based on national standards, and, you know, sometimes they're high, sometimes they're low, but overall, they're pretty darn good.
So realistically, 165 cars.
But again, keep in mind, there's not 165 that are coming out. There's probably in the range of maybe 60 of them that might come out, or 65 that might come out, because there's also a portion of them they're gonna go turn back in. So.
Do you have one comment?
Well, Joe was making light of it, but I live on Deacon Road and, we're always turning either right or left on 113. And I have less visibility at that intersection than Joe does at Senator Black Road. And the speed of the logging trucks and the water trucks and the other vehicles that are going up and down 113, I mean, rarely is anybody doing 50 miles an hour. So I think for the safety of the people in the campground that are turning in or leaving in these large vehicles that you can't move very quickly, when you do the traffic study and the traffic safety, particularly at the intersection of Senator Black Road and 113, the two things, the composition of the traffic, being a high percentage of logging trucks and water tankers and things like that, and the speed of those vehicles should be taken into consideration.
It will be.
I got one hand and one there.
Okay, I've been driving RVs for motorhomes since 2013, and, usually whenever I get off the turnpike or get on the road, I look for speed limit signs for that area. I'm also very mindful of signs that indicate curves and signs that indicate grades, because it's a tremendous responsibility to be driving something that large. And if you have an accident with a car, usually the person who ends up, when there's a fatality, it's usually the person in the vehicle, not the RV. So Senator Black has no speed limit signs, no brake signs, no signs that indicate curve. That's a concern of mine. Also, I've been living on that road for 33 years. Right now, the condition of the road looks great, because over the 3-year period, the town has been able to fund slowly fix again. Before that, it was only paved one at a time. So in 33 years, I wonder how long that road will last, where a Class A motorhome is, they have 6,000 pounds loaded, maybe, driving around 30,000. I have reservations about the road. Also, how long it can take that kind of wear, and also the amount of time it's taken right now to, there are drops off the side of the road that are about 6 inches in some areas because there has not been fill put on both sides. And you take these very large vehicles on a road such as that, a lot of people will think that RVs aren't, the big Class A's aren't as wide as they are. they are very wide, and you can't assume someone's going to pull in their mirrors, because the whole concept of the mirror is to drive safely.
Mhm.
And so that is a tremendous concern, not just of mine, but many people on the road. At one of the sharpest curves, there's a woman living there who has numerous horses. The community, the people on the road are very health conscious, and we're always walking. And, it's just going to be, a lot more traffic, a lot more to be mindful of. And I live, my house is the highest house on Senator Black Road. It used to be called, one of the names for that road is the High Road. And, for me, trying to pull out of my own driveway can be hazardous sometimes. So I would urge people to look very, very closely at the history of road maintenance. And this is no disrespect to the town of Baldwin. You know, there's always an effort to be careful about taxes for the people, where we have a very large population of retired people. So it is, I think it demands a lot of analysis to determine whether Senator Black Road can accommodate that amount of traffic and that weight.
Okay, the only question that I really feel qualified to answer right standing here this evening is the speed limit issue. And I'll just provide a little information for you. Speed limits on public roads are regulated by the Maine Department of Transportation. An unposted road in a rural setting is assumed to be 45 miles an hour unless it's posted. The town always has the right to petition Maine DOT for a reduction in speed. But if you wanted to go change that, you cannot do that legally without the commissioner's signature authorizing that change in speed. I don't think it's a bad idea to consider that, because when I looked at the sight distance on the road, I was chasing back and forth on the road trying to find the speed limit sign so that I could base it on what was there. So again, there is no posted speed limit, so it is assumed to be 45 miles an hour.
And that in and of itself is a major concern, considering a fully loaded Class A going down the hill. And the braking distance, that's a hazard.
I don't see one of those RVs probably going 45 miles an hour down over that hill, but I guess that's, well, I would hope they wouldn't either, but again, I think it would be very appropriate to consider maybe petitioning the Maine DOT on that.
Next speaker?
Okay, I happened to pick up a pamphlet from Acres of Wildlife, and it talks about getting out at 11 o'clock and being in at the latest by 9 o'clock. So there's a lot of variance in how many cars are gonna be on there. That made me feel a little better. I still have to deal with things coming down the hill to get out onto 113, so it's gonna be a bit of an issue for me. But, if this is any help for you guys to assess some of the rules and regulations and how they deal with some of the issues that we've been talking about.
Sure, that'd be great, thank you.
I
Anybody
couldn't find
else?
any more, but I'm sure that they're out there.
I appreciate it. Anybody else? We got one here, and then one back there, and then one back there. So we got, then fourth one there. Go ahead, Jerry.
Yeah, my name is Gary McNeil. I live on McNeil Road, off of Brown Road, and the only observation I wanted to make is that, accessing Marston Road from either Senator Black Road East or Senator Black Road West, but if on 113, if you take a right on Brown Road, you follow Brown Road up, and Brown Road will turn to Marston Road. The problem today is GPS, because little old Indian trails are on GPS, and people with these god-awful vehicles come down through, and they're white knuckling it, saying, "My God, how did I get here?" Well, that's how you got here. So I would hope, I know talking with a fellow who used to work at Bloomington Lumber Company, that he had a great amount of problems with tractor trailers coming up Brown Road, thinking going to the mill. So you'll notice there's a sign down here that says mill entrance, telling them to stay on 113 and not go on Brown. So someplace down the road, you might wanna consider some sort of signage if going forward. Just an observation.
Yeah, we've already talked about that. I mean, that's, and about contacting GPS, Google, to change on Google Maps. And there's a few things you can do, but absolutely, we don't want people accessing it from the opposite side, or trying to access it.
Now, they come down over that hill and it's gonna be bad.
I'm way off topic.
Well, and don't forget, we can talk
Yeah,
about
it's back
the
to the-
use too. You don't have to talk about traffic. Leave Mr. Ray
Yeah, it's
alone
about
for a while.
water, actually. What's the plan for sewage and water table, water level,
Okay,
water
so,
supply?
so we have, right now that, I mentioned earlier, there was a soil scientist, out on site, doing a bunch of test pits. So that was all part of his, charge, is also to design the septic systems, that are required. So as I mentioned before, there's, a bathroom within 500 feet, of every site. So I think
Can
we
I
have.
interrupt just for 1 second? That's the big RV section up there. Is everyone having their individual water supply and individual sewage pipe?
Everyone's gonna have, water at their site and electrical at their site, but not, most of them won't have a sewer hookup. They're gonna have to, there are a few, so within the site, there, I think we have 2, sewer dump stations proposed. They'll pull off, hook up, and be able to unload their effluent that way. Most folks within the park for septic will have to go to one of the bathrooms, for showering and for bathroom facilities. So that won't be on most of the sites. That will require, gravity lines over difficult terrain, with a depth that will be difficult to achieve. And beyond that, then we're talking about, public drinking water supply. So a public drinking water supply well, has to be located at least 300 feet away from, the nearest septic system. And so what we have, there's gonna be a series of wells, located throughout the site to really to feed each area that's closest to it.
They're in place?
A couple of them are in place. Gary,
There's
maybe-
one in place.
Yeah, there's one in place. The other ones require, before they get into operation, they require a permit, to be filed, through the Safe Drinking Water, program, which requires the actual well to be installed, tested, yields tested, and all that. So,
Monthly tested through public drinking
yeah,
water.
yeah, and then,
System service.
exactly, because it's public drinking water supply, there are testing requirements, for the life of that well.
Good, back there and then over there.
Okay, I have a question regarding, or statement regarding the roadway, and that we live on the drop-down area from one of the hills, and people already zoop by, and it's natural, because they're coming downhill. And the road just is not wide enough to sustain trailers and RVs of different types passing each other or moving along. In other words, we don't feel that the road is adequate. And we were told years ago that by the town, that the town could widen the road at any time at their option, at which point it would cut off all of our entire front lawn area up to the windows. So now whether that's true or not, I don't know, but I am concerned if we decide that the road needs to be widened, how it will impact our way of life and our property values, and I think others have the same concern if the road is widened.
I'll just say, certainly the study will determine what's required for Senator Black in particular. I think the section we measured was a 22-foot wide pavement section. That's fairly standard for a public road. Certainly there are sections where there's not much shoulder, and it does just drop off and looks like, that there are kind of, undesigned ditches there. It's not a normal section. So you have the pavement, sometimes it just drops off. As someone mentioned, the gravel is not brought up, as it should be, but your point is, we'll certainly consider your point. We do what we can.
Hi. You two, I can't remember which.
Well, we're kind of together, so.
Okay.
We live on Senator Black Road, I'm Tracy Morrow. A couple of the concerns that we have is the kids. School buses go up and down that road. There's not a single straight, flat stretch of road there that's safe for when the school buses stop, that an RV coming through is not gonna propose a hazard to the children or to the buses. let alone any of the other traffic that's coming upon it. Again, kids riding their bikes, it's always been a very quiet rural neighborhood. The folks that are walking has already been mentioned, kids riding their bikes, again, very hilly, not a lot of sight for the kids. What that's gonna do to their quality of life with all, this is going to be a tremendous amount of traffic for what we're used to. The other part of it is back to, again, beating a dead horse, I guess, the 113 entrance and exit. It's 55 through there, not 50. Hills on both sides has already been mentioned. When you're pulling off Senator Black Road and you're hauling a camper, you cannot get up to speed in time for that traffic that's coming over any direction of those hills to be safely out of the way and to be moving at traffic speed. I see that as a huge accident-prone area because those trucks, we have a camper, we have an F-350 diesel. It takes a lot to get up to speed when you're trying to haul uphill in either direction. That's what you're doing. You turn off the road, you're hauling uphill. You cannot get up to speed to 55 with those cars coming at you.
So Mr. Bray, does your traffic study and your assessment, what's safe, et cetera, does that take into consideration such things as she raised, the, school bus traffic, or, I think somebody else mentioned it as well, the non-vehicle use of the road?
Generally speaking, we do not do that in a rural setting. I'm not saying that we can't do that. In fact, DOT may require us to do that. But, if there are outstanding issues that we need to expand our study to evaluate, then I'm certainly willing to do the best we can to at least assess those items.
So if they want those issues raised, as part of the traffic movement application scoping meeting,
Got it.
that they should be at that meeting to raise those concerns.
They don't have to be at the meeting. They actually can submit written comments if they'd like to.
Or submit written comments.
Yep,
Yeah, okay, okay.
Either
You
way,
get that?
whatever their preference is.
Who do they get submitted to?
I have the address right here, but again, if you wanted to, you could certainly just submit them to the town, and the town could, make sure that they get to DOT. Yes, ma'am.
Additional, yep,
Part of my job for you folks would also be, I can attend that meeting, I've attended other scoping meetings before, and brought these types of issues to the DOT's attention. We work with the DOT all the time, so.
I mean, it is, I don't know if I speak for the board or not, but it's a little bit frustrating, we're 3 years in, and I thought we had a traffic study, I thought we were kind of done with that issue and that there were no concerns. And then now I'm hearing that there's a whole nother DOT process, and it's a little bit frustrating on my part that one major element to the issues that we have with this application aren't done.
Just to add to that, the only thing that frustrates me is not knowing who's, obviously, improvements need to be made one way or the other. On 113, we've already talked about having, pull-off lanes so that cars can go by, campers that are trying to pull in. But at the end of the day, who's paying for all that is what I don't know.
Yeah, who generally pays for the improvements? Like, if let's say, for instance, Senator Black Road, they determined you have to have 4 pullouts, to make sure that there's traffic. Or, Marston's Road has to be expanded by 5 feet on each side. Who pays for that?
My experience is, on projects that I've worked on, is that there are improvements required within the public right of way. The applicant would in fact be responsible for those, with the exception, there are state funding programs that can be used to supplement the overall cost of those, or DOT potentially could have an ongoing project that could also be used as, to leverage, some of that money as well to do the
Is
improvements.
that your experience, TJ?
Correct.
Okay. Additional, I think we were on 4, so additional, hey, you did have your hand raised, I apologize.
Okay, I had two quick questions. I think quick. One, my family lives on Senator Black also, and where are we in the process in terms of the decision being made whether or not this project moves forward? I think this question is for the planning board. Are we here because it's a foregone conclusion that this is now proceeding, and we're talking about how to make it work for what used to be a beautiful, sleepy, quiet town where we felt safe and secure in our homes? Or are we here to give input in your decision-making about whether this is the right place for this development, or how the project owners want to work with the local residents to make this work for everyone in a comfort level? If this is where we're going, can we be a team member in this process if it's inevitable? Or is it at this point, who's the decision maker? I hear that there's all these additional permit obligations, but where's my town in this decision? Is this where we're going? And what are you thinking?
Sure. Well, so our job is to decide if a conditional use permit is appropriate and what the terms of that conditional use permit should be. But it's not just up to us in terms of whether we like it or dislike it. It'd be a lot easier if it was. What we have to do is we have a town ordinance that says what you can and you can't do on your property. And so if you want to open up a car dealership in certain parts of the town, you can do that. You have a right to do that as long as you come and get a conditional use permit and figure out, work with us in terms of what those conditions are going to be. But we have guidelines that we have to follow about what conditions that we can put on a property. So we can't just make it up. Our job is to apply the permit application process. It has lists of standards that we have to look at, like noise, traffic, pollution, stormwater. There's about 15 different factors that we have to look at, and to the extent that one of those factors impinges on the neighbor's use, what we try to do is put conditions on to reduce the impact to the neighbors to the extent possible. If we're talking about a dynamite factory or a dynamite use test facility, we may not be able to reduce the impact to a place that would be okay. But everything that's come in front of us today for 30 years, 40 years, the board has found a way to work with the applicant to put conditions on that are required under the ordinance. So our job is to work with the applicant to find out if there is a way they can do what they want to do under the ordinance, and then and get information from you to tell us what we should. I mean, we've done this enough that we kind of know some of the big issues, but some of the smaller issues, like, I don't mean small in the sense of minute, I mean small in the sense of I didn't think of it, is, foot traffic on the road. I just didn't think of it, which is why we have these meetings. So is it a foregone conclusion? It's not a foregone conclusion. Has the applicant met the requirement to get to this point? Yes. And once the public hearing is done, then what we do is we start to deliberate over the application to determine what conditions need to be put on here and whether or not they meet the requirements of the ordinance. That could take, in some cases, it takes about 15 minutes if certain types of use. This application, I think, will take multiple meetings, including some meetings with the town lawyers here, and to work through the process. But our goal, because that's what we're hired to do for no pay, is to, try to get applicants to meet the ordinance and to give them permits if they can meet the ordinance. Our goal is not to deny somebody who meets the requirements of the ordinance. So it doesn't totally answer your question, but it's kind of what I think everybody on the board views their job as.
The other thing to add to that is it's not just conformance with the town's land use ordinance. The town's land use ordinance also specifies that campgrounds shall conform to the minimum requirements imposed under state licensing. That includes DOT, DEP, and all those things. So there's a kind of a plethora of ordinances and rules and regulations that the campground has to successfully meet in order to get into business.
You had two questions, though. What was your second?
I did, and I'll make a comment before my second question, since you gave me the floor for a second. I hope that if this project does move forward and the applicant meets all the requirements and all the permits come through, that you'll remember that there are people who've lived here for 30 and 40 years. Don't lose sight of that. I know this is a business and that there's an objective behind this program, and I'm gonna keep an open mind and hope that something good comes back to this town if this is where we're going. But you're disrupting the way of life for a lot of people who have lived in a particular way for a long time and who live in West Baldwin, Maine because we love it here for those very reasons. And please don't lose sight of that and think that, yeah, we have to go to the public hearing where everybody's going to complain about our project. We're not complainers, we're real people with real lives who love where we live and try to be our partner. If we're moving forward together, let's try to do this together. And don't forget how much love there is for this land for a lot of people sitting in this room. So you said keep emotions in check, and I'm never very good at that. But that's my
I meant more the anger.
I mean, I've been involved in a lot of projects, and I think it's really easy to see it as us against them. And that's not this. I mean, this is a beautiful little town, and just don't forget whose lives are being impacted. So it might be great for the campers coming along, and I can appreciate that because I love coming here too every day. But you're making a big change, and that's not necessarily coming at our request. And please be respectful and remember that as we move forward as partners, if that's where we're headed. The second question is, there's been some communication about whether any of the selectmen or any of the planning board members have a financial interest in this project in any way, shape, or form, and I wondered if anybody could comment or correct for the record any factual concern to that extent.
So I can speak on behalf of the planning board that, we don't have any financial interest in it. I think Matt, Fricker, lives within shooting distance of it. Is that fair? How far away? Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm at the other end of Deacon Road. I don't know how long Deacon Road is, but, if you start on Deacon Road at, 113, I'm about a quarter of a mile down, and then it becomes a two-track, which eventually meets Marston Road where the campground is. I think that there are people who actually live, a lot of people who actually live closer to the property lines of the campground than I do, but I have no financial interest.
And then, Mr. Pierce has recused himself. To my knowledge, he doesn't have any financial interest, but he has property that's more proximate to Mr. Fricker's, but he has no financial interest. I'll let the selectmen speak for themselves on what, their situation is.
And I'm Gary Brown, I'm a selectman, also operations manager at the campground. Anything to do with the campground, I recuse myself.
Okay.
I'm sitting in the audience tonight as Gary Brown.
Okay.
I love and enjoy this town as well, and I do my job over there, and I do my job at the campground.
And you live in the town.
And I live in the town, Brown Road.
Gary, do you have any ownership stake in the campground, or are you just an employee?
Employee. It's talks, there's nothing actually in writing that says.
And the other selectmen, do you have any financial interest in the project? Okay. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Excuse me, if I may, just briefly, to just speak to the point that you brought up, as far as, we're also here to get input from people in the town, so this is not, as far as an us versus them, you know, we like to think of it as this is us to a degree. You know, certainly, we've heard some great ideas tonight as far as signage and widening turning radii and those things. You know, we take what we hear tonight and we go back and we discuss them and we see what we can reasonably do. Certainly, you know, not everyone's gonna be happy, you know, with everything, and we're not, you know, gonna propose to widen a couple miles of Senator Black Road, but there are certainly things that we can do, and we will consider those things. So anyway, but your comments are appreciated and necessary.
All right, I gotta do new voices first, so, we'll do a new voice here, one over there, and then back to you.
Okay, I'm Lori Downey, I live in West Baldwin, and I guess you brought up just generally the ordinances, and I had to go back and reread some of the ordinances, especially for conditional use. And I just wanted to read a piece of, this is Article 8.3A. Neither the proposed use nor the proposed site upon which the use will be located is of such a character that the use will have significant adverse impact upon the value or quiet possession of surrounding properties greater than would normally occur from such a use in the district. So, I guess the way I'm interpreting that, and you guys should tell me if this is right, is that a campground is an allowed use. So, you know, they're allowed to propose and have a campground. But the size of the campground and the qualities of it are something that we can talk about, and especially in terms of their location. So is that a fair way to describe?
Yep.
Right. So, you know, when we're talking about traffic and the increase in traffic, I think that's talking about how large this project is. Because that's really a concern of mine. I look at the fact that I don't have a problem with a campground being there, but I do have a problem with a campground with 300 sites being there. To me, you know, I looked at the list of campgrounds that were provided in the materials, and I don't think there was one that was that large. I think they went from 60 sites to 198, if I didn't miss something. So 300 is a really big campground, and I think that's partly why the traffic load is gonna be so high, and why, you know, we're all worried about sort of the effect of this on the town. If that place is full, and there are, say, 3 to 4 people at each site, I don't know if that's a fair estimate, but, you know, that gets up to close to 1,000 people. And Baldwin, how many people are in Baldwin? Like 1,500? Yeah, so it's, you know, that's a lot of people. That's like another town inside our town. So my appeal to you guys would be really think about that. I like that you said you were very interested in a phased sort of a process with this. I mean, I would really like to see this place start small and we see how it goes. I don't know if that's possible to do, but to go right to 300, I mean, that's gonna really, I agree, that's gonna change.
We actually propose starting in phases.
Yeah.
To get everybody comfortable with it, start with the small, and just for financial reasons.
Yeah.
To just open to 300 sites isn't realistic.
But would the permit be for 300 sites, or would the permit be?
The application is 300 sites.
So, that would be something I would be interested in, whether it's possible to just permit for 40 or whatever it was you were starting with, and then to do the permitting in phases.
The permit as submitted does not speak of phases. That's something that, at least for me, I heard for the first time at the site walk that there was that the applicant had concept of doing it in phases.
Yeah.
I don't know what that looks like.
So we have the ability, we being the planning board, regardless of what the developer, is proposing, if they do seek and get approval for their 300 sites, can set a phase limit and then establish performance that they have to provide prior to allowing the second phase to occur, or the third phase to occur. So, part of my responsibility for the board is to listen to all of this information as well and help the board formulate a whole lot of conditions on this project, based on the issues that are there. And then it will be up to them to accept or reject any or all of those conditions as it relates to how the project will move forward. And certainly phasing is one of those things that we can, get a lot more detail on. It's not just phasing. It's showing the phase lines, it's establishing bonding for construction of that phase, and not releasing bonding until certain performance standards are met for phase 2 to be constructed. There's a number of things that can be developed in relation to that.
But it's, can I just a follow-up?
Always one more
Would it be possible for the board to say, no, we won't grant for 300, but come back to us with another proposal that's scaled down?
The planning board can certainly, if they choose, you've read your ordinance, you're fairly well educated on this. There's a list of performance standards that's in the ordinance relevant to stormwater, relevant to traffic. If they feel that one of those performance standards cannot be met based on their application, the board can deny the application based on that performance standard. The applicant can go back and redo the application for something smaller if that's something that led them to deny the application. So, yes, that could happen. I've only been involved in one or two where I've seen that, and actually, we prepared findings of fact on a development project to deny the application for a planning board, and the applicant came back and said, please, 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 I will redo whatever I need to do to get my approvals. So it really is a massive public open negotiation that occurs to try and get the applicant to the place that the planning board feels comfortable.
Yeah, this all happens in public. It's all second, fourth Thursday, 7 to 9:05.
Megan Smith, I live on Senator Black Road as well with her. I know it's already been brought up once, but I just want to elaborate on it a little bit more, is the signage, not just being on 113 itself saying, oh, the campground's up this way. It needs to be labeled on Senator Black Road as well. Our driveway is 1,000-foot to 1,500-foot long dirt driveway. I cannot tell you the amount of campers and trucks that pulled into my driveway over this past summer, thinking it was the campground for whatever reason. And with the traffic going up, obviously, and my kids not being able to ride their bikes up and down the road, as a safety concern, it's gonna limit them to riding on my dirt driveway only. And if I've got trucks with campers hooked onto the back of them pulling into my driveway, it's still a safety concern in my own driveway.
Right.
So the road needs to be labeled along Senator Black Road itself as well. So just elaborating on that a little bit more, because I had to fight with them to get a school bus sign put up.
Which, by the way, thank you.
Yeah. I tried to put the kids on the road. I tried to keep them in the So, just elaborating on that a little bit more. And then, I know you said that there's a whole list of rules that the campers are gonna have to follow, obviously. Quiet time. Is there a plan in place to have security on hand at all times, like Acres of Wildlife has? Because
who's gonna police it?
Are you gonna police that, Gary?
He was talking to me, that last end of the question, could you repeat it, please?
A plan in place to enforce the rules at all times, like quiet time,
There'll be employees on site 24/7.
like security and stuff like that, to handle campers that are drinking.
I wouldn't call it security, I'd call it employees. There's not gonna be like a trained security guard there or anything. There'll be employees. I'm gonna be there basically all the
But somebody
time.
you can call and be like, look, we got this type of issue going on, can you come handle it or help us out?
Absolutely.
Just to.
Is there gonna be noise ordinances in reference to like live music bands, fireworks, things like that? Because our property borders
The camp
the camp on the lower pond end, so and the noise travels, I mean, we can hear the equipment running. So what type of,
Which, by the way, doesn't bother us, so it's good.
yeah, no. But with that being said, what type of noise are we gonna have from the people, from the four-wheelers, from, bands, live music, just throwing some things out there? And will the town have that enforcement, or will that fall under the campground enforcement?
I believe it'll fall into both.
So if somebody's shooting off fireworks at 12 and you guys can't get them under control, we can contact the town as well, type thing.
That'd be a sheriff issue, but
But with that being said too, with acres, it's considered private property and the sheriffs are limited.
Yeah, they have their own security.
They have their own security, so the sheriffs can't just go into the campground unless there's a serious safety issue.
I don't think we've really thought through that from our perspective.
And that's something I just wanted to
No, it's a great
give
point.
you to think about. I know that the proposal doesn't come on this side of the, pond there, but, you know, my concern is somebody drinking late at night and wandering up, like I said, our property borders
Well,
are.
I understand the housing portion of it doesn't come on that side, but the use does.
Yeah, and that's the other thing is, you guys say trails and stuff, are there gonna be trails on that side? Because if you guys extend into the fall, we hunt, and, you know, my property borders that, so.
And we hunt down on that side of the pole line, so.
That's another thing that I'm gonna have to take into consideration.
The proposed use is from May something to October.
But you still got archery season in there.
Your land is posted though, right, so
Yes.
basically anybody wouldn't be on your land,
without permission.
yeah, right, so I don't know how that would.
Well, that's what we're kinda thinking, if you're into archery season, maybe not into gun season, but into archery season, they
They'll
got
be
people
closed.
coming up
They'll be
towards
closed.
the pole lines, traveling the pole lines.
Campground will be closed by November, or by October, so.
But archery season's in October.
Correct, but
Yeah.
on their land, it's posted, so.
Yeah, no, it's
No, I have,
it's
like-
an issue, no, I
But,
mean, it's
no,
an issue.
we're not gonna have campers coming up there for archery season to go hunting on the property.
Well, and that's what my concern is like, you know,
Well,
we have the fall crowd.
We are
Well,
not.
it's in the list pay. I'm just saying, I mean,
We're,
we gotta talk about it, we gotta talk about it.
What is in our application is what we're going to do and ask for. It's not in the application, correct?
So we will be clear that
That there will
that's
be
not
no
something that's
hunting
allowed.
on the property.
I just say something to the 300 site, and this is my perspective on.
Matt Sanborn, East
March Road.
Birch
March
Road,
Road, North Walton.
far too close to me.
So the 300 sites, my perspective since I've been on the board, this has been talked about for a few years now.
You missed the detail history.
I didn't get it. My daughter had a course concert tonight, so that's why I wasn't here. We've asked them to include everything they want in the application. Basically, what we asked them to do was, what do you guys, if there's anything you want, we want it in the application. And that's what they were supposed to do. I think that's why they have 300 sites listed. I know the amount of sites has changed. This is the third application, roughly, fifth application we've received. So, I agree with Gary that they're not gonna have 300 sites 5 years from now. 15, 20 years from now, it's a possibility. But we wanted to have them included, so I think that's why they went with that number. They redesigned, this summer, the whole campground, from past applications. Past applications had campsites on the other side of the pond. They got rid of that. And so, it's kind of why it's taken so long to get to this point where you know, we hear the public hearing, because until October of this year roughly, we never had this application, so. But that's probably, the chances of 300 sites being there in 5-10 years from now are pretty slim, in my opinion.
Okay, we had a bunch of hands come up, new voices always go first, so we got one back there, oh gosh, I'm sorry. Joe can go, then we'll go back there, we'll go there, and we'll come back.
So I wanted to follow up on what this lady was saying, and there's a confusion here in my mind about how, when do you grant or not grant a permit? Would you do that before all the traffic studies are done? And if there's a phase-in, say, a permit was granted and then the study comes in that we need a turnout lane, and I don't know what a quarter mile of road costs these days, but it might, the campground might at that point say, well, I guess this is the limit, we're only gonna have 40 campsites. And 40 campsites isn't a long-term viable thing, and so we're folded. I mean, I'm just concerned about this whole situation of when do you grant a permit and when are the studies over? I never heard of granting a permit before the studies were done.
Yeah, I mean, I think I had a little bit clearer idea of the path before I heard the need for this traffic study and the scope of the traffic study in terms of potentially having to widen roads and, I guess that's why I said I was frustrated, because I feel like some of our concerns are either going to be addressed or not going to be addressed by the traffic study, and so I don't know the answer. What I heard though is, that a certain side can be done without a traffic study, and so I guess I would like to start talking about what that looks like as phase one, and talk about granting a permit in phase one without having to worry about what that traffic study ends up to be. Whether or not it's economically viable, I don't think it's really up to us.
Right.
But yeah, I've got the biggest mouth, so, but I mean,
This is a tricky issue, one that's always befuddled me a little bit. And I asked about this during the site walk. And apparently, there's a sequence or hierarchy to local approvals and higher level state approvals. So that the campground actually needs local approval, the conditional use permit, in order to then go to some state operations. I don't know if it's DOT or DEP or what, but they actually have to take that CUP to the state and say, okay, we have local approval, and then, no, that's not right, Jay? That's what I was told.
I'm not sure who told you that, but, in some towns, they actually say, do not come back for I'm paraphrasing, but do not come back for final approval until you receive any approvals you need from the state. So, if they plan on phasing this project, and they don't need a DEP, and they don't need a traffic movement permit for phase one, whatever that may be, you can approve that contingent on them not expanding beyond that phase until they receive the additional permits from the DOT and DEP that are required of them.
and come back.
And come back,
Right.
correct,
Right.
correct. There's no hierarchy of permits. In fact, the hierarchy of permits would be, you need your DOT and DEP permit before you get your local approval, because there are certain conditions and other things that the state may put on them.
So we
You don't
actually
want it
wouldn't,
you don't-
wouldn't approve the CUP before they have all their.
I would not recommend it, because you may not put certain conditions on them that the DEP or DOT may want to put on them. And so you want to make sure you're all inclusive with everything.
Right. But by the same token, I think also, they wanna know that we're generally good
Yeah.
with the project
Yeah.
before they go to DOT.
Sure.
Like, if we say, you know, that's a weird symbol you created with all these roads, create a different symbol.
Right.
They wanna know that,
Right.
so it's a little bit of a handshake, at a certain juncture.
Yeah, I mean, they're gonna wanna know when they get to a certain point that, you know, okay, we're gonna be good to go, so that when we get our state permit, that we can come back and, you know.
Yeah.
So, let me be real clear on this.
Mm-hmm.
So is what you're saying that we have the CUP,
Mm-hmm.
they complete the, a little bit more on the traffic study,
Mm-hmm.
and then they come to us and, you know, they wanna vote, okay?
Yep.
And we finish with the public hearing.
Yep.
We can vote to approve the CUP with a condition that they can't start doing business until they come back to us with the, state DOT and DEP approvals. I mean, it sounds like a conditional use permit.
Well, but I don't think we wouldn't grant the permit. We would change the we would ask the applicant, it still has to be by agreement. The applicant can say, no, I want you to vote on what I have in front of you. Good luck. But, with the applicant, we can say, look, we really want you to come with the permit for this part of it, not the entirety, and we look at that. I mean, the permit is not sacrosanct. We can work with the applicant to find a happy place for everybody.
You can approve
Here's a
phase
request I have for
one,
you.
for example, without.
We have this document here.
Yep.
Okay?
Mm-hmm.
I would like to know very specifically
Mm-hmm.
what additional submissions and approvals Nature's Wilderness has to get from the DEP and the DOT and any other state agencies.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we're gonna do some kind of a handshake deal that things look good to us when you come back with these state level approvals, we'll sign the CUP. We need to know exactly what needs to happen at that state level.
Well, first let me say, I would never say it's a handshake agreement, and I would never let them know that they're gonna receive approvals just because they got their DEP or DOT permit.
Right.
I would say you could do phase one, which doesn't necessarily meet whatever threshold the traffic permit is, and we may require them to do certain things that we can at the local level for certain traffic without hitting the DOT threshold. And then, once you receive a DOT threshold permit, you can come back for the next phase or phases.
Yeah, but
The problem is, like, how far do you wanna go down? Like, the application says, we need this DOT, we need this DEP. But do you wanna get into Department of Health and Human Services, ability to operate a restaurant at that facility? The ability to operate the
well,
pool?
there you're talking about if it's not a hierarchy, at least it's an approval before they have all the other state, approvals. And, you know, I wouldn't be comfortable approving a CUP if I knew that whether it's 40 or 400, that there is a potentially lurking environmental, protection approval that they have to get, related to sewage or water flow or something like that.
Except that the safeguard for you is, the condition is that you cannot come back for your additional phases until you obtain those permits. So they may only build 40 units, we throw out 40 units. They may only be able to build 40 units, who knows what the DEP or DOT says, or whether they're willing to live with those conditions that the state is putting them. So you can approve a project that meets a lesser threshold than the permits at the state level. They're just not gonna expand beyond that until they obtain those other permits from the state.
I'm gonna jump to, there's more questions, or
Well, you
bounds,
picked
as
the wrong
Mike
night,
just
huh?
said. I said if time permits,
I
so.
saw that right on the website, as a matter of fact.
So there was 4 or 5 hands up, so don't put them back down. There was one here, okay, yeah, so it's 1, 2, oh, no, it's her, it's her. 1, 2, 3, so 1.
Wanted to follow up on the noise concerns that have been expressed. This property's already generated numerous noise complaints. And my question is, what sort of activities will be on the property that could be heard by neighbors? You've mentioned ATVs. Will trail bikes also be permitted? Will snowmobile watercross activities be permitted? There was a question about fireworks, and I don't think that was answered. Is there going to be a shooting range? Are there any other types of activities that could be disturbed, that could disturb neighbors? And if there are, what measures will you take to make sure that neighbors aren't disturbed?
No shooting range, that's not in the CUP. The snowmobiles, I'm not having any more snowmobiles because they're too loud and it just upsets everybody. It's not worth it. We want a campground. That's ultimately what we want, is a family campground. Have we been using the property as like a personal? Yes. When it becomes a campground, it'll be a family place. Everything that we want is in the application, but no fireworks. Maybe 4th of July will be fireworks, but it's not gonna be like an every weekend thing. No shooting range. ATVs are allowed on the property. They're gonna stay within the limit and not leave the property.
Yeah, maybe you could, about the fireworks, maybe we could put something in there that says the campground can do firework events at certain times, but campers are not allowed to, you know, even though it's legal in the state.
That would be something you'd have to put onto us.
But that's what I'm, that's kind of what I'm getting at. Yeah. So it's
Fi-
not just
fireworks
willy-nilly.
are legal.
They're legal, but what I'm saying is one of your rules, the campground could be that you guys can shoot fireworks at certain times, but.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, I do think the permit though should reflect the fact that those sorts of activities will not take place. I think it should be expressly prohibited.
Appreciate that.
Okay, one issue has come up that I think should be solved, is Marston Road a town road?
Marston Road is a town road.
Then there
It's
should be
a
a sign
three-rod
saying
road.
Marston Road right there on the Black Road, so that we're not going up people's driveways looking for, because right now you're clueless, even if you live in this
That
town.
actually makes a ton of sense. Could the selectmen, can you guys get a road sign up there?
It's a small green one. The fact that I feel
I
like.
didn't see it, I didn't see it. Yeah, I didn't see it, so.
Right at Senator Black
It's in
Road?
the trees.
In the trees.
Rob, can we, as, can the selectmen,
anyways for 9/11 addresses and stuff, so.
can the selectmen take it on themselves to promote the out there, and if it's not apparently obvious to fix that? That seems to be pretty.
Because Nature's Wilderness could then use that if they wished, so that people wouldn't be going up the wrong road searching for.
I didn't see the sign, so I'm with you.
I mean, we recently had Saddleback Road become Saddleback West and Saddleback East, which, makes me upset, because one is this level and one is that level. But at least let's get a sign up that says Marston Road and not having blowing up people's driveways.
Well, make sure it's obvious, maybe make it more obvious for the.
I went by, I missed it just the other day,
Yeah, I
for a
didn't see it.
sidewalk.
I didn't see it. Was that your only point? Good point.
Right now, that's my point.
So you guys find out who's gonna go.
Yeah, we're fighting over it, but we're good. Just a thought, if you do like event fireworks, one of the concerns that we were just talking about was the dense tree line. And if it could make sure that it's over the lower pond or someplace that's safer versus maybe back, where the campers are, where the trees are thicker, just for safety purposes, forest fire purposes.
That's absolute common sense.
Yeah, well, yeah, but yeah, just something like that. The other question that I have is, what is this project going to do to our property taxes? What is it going to do?
Look at me like I have an answer.
What it is, no, I mean, when this gets all up and going, what's it going to do to our property values? Is Is it gonna make them up or down? And then our taxes are expressly related to that, especially with the assessments coming up, or happening.
So has the applicant done any assessment as to the amount of potential taxes they have to pay to the town due to this project?
That would be the assessment company that tell us that. It's gonna be, personal property tax is $15 on 1,000. There's a lot of thousands up there, so we'll be paying a lot of taxes.
Bob Flint estimated it was $19,000 a year.
And 19,000 revenue coming in
Yeah.
for us.
That's a build out. That's a build out.
That was at build out. What was proposed at the time, a year ago, 2 years ago, I don't know.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of proposals.
So
So would this-
substantial taxes regardless.
So
the neighboring
my
property.
thinking of that would be that the town of Baldwin, would receive more in taxes than they currently receive. Whether or not it's a net benefit is a totally different question, because you have usage, you may have additional fire usage, which costs the money, town to the money. You may have additional road repair, somebody mentioned, that costs the town money. Whether or not it's a net benefit, I don't have that answer.
Is there the potential that it's gonna, a business of this size in this area would raise the property values and causing us more tax money out of our pocket?
I think decrease
It could, and I don't know the answer.
And my concern is, obviously, we all pinch our pennies, but there are a lot of older folks on that road, my parents specifically that I'm concerned with, they're on a fixed income, 100% fixed income. Their property taxes go up $300 a year. They don't have extra $300 a year.
Yeah,
And they're abutting properties
I think
too,
most
so.
people's concern is that the value of their land that's proximate to the campground is going to go down in value because of the destruction of the quiet atmosphere that is currently based, that's what the land value is based on.
So it could go the opposite way then, it's just, until it's all said and done, we wouldn't really know.
We would not know. I mean, I think our biggest concern is that it's gonna cost the town more in services. I mean, that's why towns have impact fees, where if you're gonna build a subdivision, you have to give the town $100,000 because you're gonna cost the town money in having this usage in terms of fire, in terms of, a traffic light, or not traffic light, what do you call it, street light somewhere in an intersection.
Don't put any streetlights up, please.
I'm not saying that.
Was the town of Gorham was doing $10,000 per site?
It was 10,000 per site, I think, Gorham. All right, so we're at 9:10, 9:09. I'm more than happy to go a little bit longer, because the alternative is board. So at this juncture, we can either continue the public hearing if we think there's additional things that need to be said to the next meeting, which would be, in January? Yeah. If we don't think that the public has had the ability to complete the discussion, we can continue it. We can continue the meeting tonight, past 9, which we're already past. I don't have strong feelings one way or another. If we do it in January, you have to notice it again and all that, but, you as a board have a desire either to continue tonight or to continue the public hearing at the next, board meeting.
Sorry, I missed the beginning of it, but I've heard a lot of great points tonight. It'd be nice to know kind of a show of hands from the group here. I'm sure they have more questions. I think that doing it another meeting or another public hearing is a good idea. And I'm not against staying another 45 minutes or whatever, but.
Well, that kind of gives us time to mull things over, process things through in our head, and maybe come up with additional suggestions, ideas, or concerns.
Other discussion on the board?
based on that, sequence discussion we had, we're not anywhere close to approving or taking a vote to approve the CUP, whether we have one or two more public hearings. Because just on the traffic impact study, if the traffic impact study is not going to be completed till sometime this spring or summer, we're not going to be voting to approve the CUP until we see the results of, the traffic impact study, additions at a minimum. Am I understanding that correct?
Well, that's up to the board.
It's up to you folks.
Like, we can call a vote as soon as this public meeting's done if you want.
The point is that there is no required sequencing. It can happen any way you want it to happen.
Right.
Some towns do wait, others don't. You can condition it on being phased, so that the phase that triggers DOT, for example, cannot be constructed until after that permit has been achieved.
I think that's a long discussion. I don't think it's an obvious answer.
No, for the safety of the citizens of Baldwin, particularly the people that live on Senator Black Road, I'm not gonna be comfortable saying, yeah, go ahead, start doing business, whether it's 40 sites or 400 sites, until we really have a very thorough traffic impact study that incorporates the intersections of Senator Black Road and Marston Road and Senator Black Road and 113. So, I guess where I'm at is we should continue the public hearing process.
I wanna be respectful of all these people who came here, and I think we should continue this evening for a while, and then reassess if people feel heard, or if we need to come back and continue it.
I would ask for a show of hands of how many other people want to speak tonight, so we can get an idea. Are we talking 10 minutes, half an hour, an hour? But I'm willing.
There's 10 minutes.
But I'm willing to stay longer.
My husband desperately wanted to be here tonight and couldn't. He had another commitment that he couldn't change. If you continued the hearing, I'm confident that he would want to be here to give comments. I'll add that.
So why don't we do this? Why don't we, continue to 9:30? At 9:30, I'm pretty much done for the day, I'll admit it. So, at 9:30, we'll, in a 2-minute span, we'll decide whether to continue to the next meeting. So additional discussion, so this gentleman came for a totally different project. He's talking to Wes, so you know. He came for a totally different project. I said, if we have time, I had no idea if 1 or 100 people would show up, so thank you for coming, I apologize. We're gonna keep going.
I saw the cars in the parking lot, I had a good
Next meeting, we'll put you on the agenda first.
And
All right,
thank
so
you for your time.
other questions, comments, concerns, for anybody here about Nature's Wilderness, new voices and then old voices?
This will only take, I bet he can answer it in 60 seconds or less. The traffic that seems to disturb everybody, which is a valid one, did you base that on 300 campsites being all filled?
When I evaluated the traffic in this 2017 report, it was based on 250 campsites. The traffic movement permit application that's been sent to the DOT is prepared based on 300 campsites.
Okay. So the possibility though of all 300 campsites being filled at the same time would be very remote in my estimation. So I think the impact of the traffic is not going to be as severe as predicted. Isn't that a reasonable assumption?
It could be. However, the the rates that I'm required to use usually take that into consideration, because they are actually based on studies done at campgrounds to come up with those rates. And if you assume that a campground has so much occupancy, an occupancy level, those counts were done on that occupancy level, I would say that it might account for a less than filled campground, those rates. I'd have to dig into the detail of how the rates are actually calculated to accurately answer that question, but
So
that
by
would
the
be
same
my.
token, if it's full, it could be more.
Yeah, it could be, but again, the trip rate is actually based on, a campground site. That's the rate that is the average rate for a campground site.
You good?
Yeah.
Couple of things. One, I would observe that people have been leaving, and that might be because it's, for people who have to go to work first thing in the morning, that this might be getting late. And for that reason, I would suggest adjourning to another night. The other thing I'd like to observe, we talked about fireworks, and Gary said they're legal in the state of Maine. However, we have home rule, and a town, 25 people can put an article on the warrant, and we could make fireworks illegal in the town of Baldwin. I'm just saying, you know, that's one of the reasons why that encourages you to compromise. You know, it's not just about fireworks, it's about a lot of other things. 25 people can put an article on the warrant, and the legislative body is the town meeting, and the town meeting is pretty darn powerful.
My question is, when we're dealing with potential housing developments and looking at impact fees, always having that option of passing that on to the developer, if you don't sign off on anything, or you leave it open, wouldn't these for turnouts and stuff that you're talking about revert back down to the nature's wilderness, not the town?
Yeah, well, Baldwin has never, been very receptive to a discussion of impact fees, so we don't have anything like that, you know, in Baldwin. This whole turnout thing and the changes of the road, that's all new to me. I mean, that's the first we're considering that, so, I don't, you know, I trust these guys, cause they say the applicant's gonna pay for it, so. Yeah, I think you have to have performance bonds, and they have to do those things before they start operating, which I think is why Matt is saying,
And I'm in agreement with Matt.
really like to know what that looks like, because we don't really want them to start operating until we know they can financially cover those improvements.
Yeah, I think
And the town wants to do it.
Yeah.
You know, if it requires widening Center to Black Road, you know, they're private entities, they don't get to make that decision, they have to ask for permission.
Yeah. I think that's prudent to do it that way, Matt.
I mean, you could be talking a lot of money, I mean, you're talking, you know, Route 113 is what it is, I mean, you're gonna do turnout lanes, but if you have to widen Center to Black Road, I mean, you're paying, you know, eminent domain to a lot of people,
Well, they would have, it's a 3-rod road, I think, so they'd have 49.5 or 47.5 feet on, you know, total feet, so I'm sure there's a right of way there that they could do, it's the cost of construction.
right,
that's
also,
the-
and who's gonna pay for it, and
Right.
obviously, we don't wanna.
Well, even to the point this gentleman was talking about shoulders, whatever, but you might be looking at guardrails too. I mean, if you've got, God forbid, it's gonna be bad enough if something gets out of control, but if you put up guardrails or something to keep it in the roadway rather than down over an embankment.
Or in somebody's house.
Yeah, yeah.
I think it's worth saying that Center to Black Road is a town road and it meets town road standards. And town road standards are assumed to be safe for public transport, you know, of all vehicles.
Right.
So I don't expect, the need, you know, an analysis to report come out that requires widening of the road. I would suspect, you know, we're widening making the radii larger and clearing some vegetation in the right of way to make sightlines better. I think that's what the studies will end up coming out. That's the most likely outcome. I think it would be very surprising to find out that a 22-foot wide road could not handle you know, regular traffic. And by regular, I mean what's normally allowed by the DOT on streets.
When do you expect to hear back from the DOT? Because you said you have submitted something to them.
I'm hopeful that in the next 2 or 3 weeks, again, keeping in mind of the holidays, that we will have a scoping meeting date, but I am very confident that that date will be after the first of the year.
Can we get your materials, the,
Scoping meeting.
no, not the scoping meeting, but
The
the
scoping meeting is
traffic
not the
movement
approval.
application, can we get those electronically?
Yes, it'll take a little bit of work, but yes, you can.
If you could just send it to Danielle with the selectmen,
Okay,
Gary knows the number.
all right, we'll do that.
Cause we can put that up on, it sounds like a pretty interesting document, so I think that should go up on the website.
You should scan it.
I'm gonna cross off my telephone number.
You have enough questions?
Yes.
Yes, new voices.
Oh, I'm not a new voice, you know that.
Today.
And I'm going to hand Marion my roll of duct tape if my mouth gets out of control. Very quickly, I want to thank all of you on the board. I know this whole thing has been a trial for many years, and I've been at many of the meetings, and I'm amazed at how well you can perform under much duress. And I'm very appreciative of that. I know you get paid big bucks, but nonetheless. And to reiterate one more thing without clashing with anyone, I agreed with the lady over there. If there were a way that we could work out mutually something agreeable to all of us, I've said that from the get-go, right from my first meeting with Mr. Efron. That would be ideal. Still like to see it happen, but the other piece of that is yes, I'm very worried about my real estate values. My barn is across the street. We bought the house 7.5 years ago. I fell so in love with the town and the house. My one hesitation was the fact that the barn was across the street. I'm lucky enough to live right in the middle of Senator Black Road, yes, on that curve with a hill. People that live on the east side tend to go out the east way. People that live on the west tend to go off the west way. I might get 20, 25 cars a day, maybe a few more on weekends when grandparents or grandchildren visit. I worry about my animals. They're in that barn, 15 feet from the road. I worry about my grandchildren. I worry about Rodney back there walking in the middle of the road with his wolf coat clothes on. It's a road that we've all loved and appreciated. We've respected one another to the nth degree on that road. I never would have moved there had I known a project like this was going to take place. And at my age, I'm not apt to move again until I'm kicking and screaming at my daughters or something. But I commend you all and thank you very, very much for not only helping us residents deal with what might be happening in our town, but being so willing and open to work with Gary and Scott in making this project be realistic for all of us. Thank you.
I appreciate that.
I'll take my duct tape.
We have property on the backside of this whole, campsite, if you will, campsite. And I just wanted to come and listen to what was going on. Our main concern is how much ATV traffic might be up on the mountain. Will it affect us? Will it wander over to us? Is there a limit on how many ATVs a camper can bring? I mean, I raced
You can only
motocross
drive one at a
many
time.
years. Well, no, I've raced for years and I know repercussions of the environment. I mean, I love dirt bikes, don't get me wrong, but I also have bought land in Baldwin to be away from all that. So I have a balance and I'm just a little concerned about if all that is address like the road issues.
Yeah,
You know,
I mean, I can
avoid
answer some of
sitting,
it, So, from day one, we've been super concerned about the idea that there's motorized vehicles that don't respect the boundaries of the property. You know, it's a big piece of property, and if folks come there to use that piece of property, they need to know where the ends are. I think the applicant's been pretty receptive to, putting up signage and trying to enforce that signage that people don't go off the property. Mr. Efron owns some property on the backside, it would be, west, the northwest. He owns another, I think it's like 100 acres, it's about 100 acres, two parcels. We've been very clear that those are not part of this application, and the signage will stop people from the use of those. In terms of the ATV use or the motorbike use, I think that's something that concerns us, whether or not we're talking about, a racing loop, or are we talking about somebody, going off into the woods and respecting nature? How do you legislate that?
Well, I just,
No, but it's
some
concern,
concern
yeah.
with our insurance, do we have to worry, is somebody, do I need an umbrella policy because somebody wandered over and hit a tree?
Yeah, we're gonna try to keep them off your property, not part of this.
And I do respect the people that hunted there for years, and I like to let them hunt and feel free or hike as we let people wander around, but.
Gary, can you speak to the trail bikes and the ATV in terms of what kind of use you foresee, on the trail system?
Once we're up and going campground, it's gonna be a family riding four-wheelers, it won't be a racing venue. It'll be just normal four-wheelers riding around. There's plenty of a buffer. We got hundreds of acres all around, the whole area for a buffer. We're gonna contain them onto the campsite premises, and the trails abutting. Nothing leaves the property though, they're all dead end loops.
Isn't the campground planning to, tap into the main, the system, the trail?
They approached us, but I don't know if that's viable. The Buxton Hollis Rod and Gun Club, ATV Club did approach us.
Could you repeat that? I
Sure,
don't see anybody over here.
the question that she asked was, that she heard that there's a possibility that the campground would connect with the existing, trail system for the ATVs, and the answer was?
They had approached us, but there's no deal made or anything like that.
The answer is more important than the question.
Thank you.
And we've also talked about it's a bit of a through trail for snowmobiles during the winter. And while there is, one of the restrictions we've talked about is that there's no activity on the site on off hours other than the private use of the residents on the property. If you see at the bottom there, there's essentially a residence, which can be rented out, but it's also it's a four-season house. And that they can use that as a private residence, but they're not to have, any, activities, snowmobile activities on the property. But that doesn't mean people aren't gonna be driving through just as they are today. I mean, or not today, but in general. And in terms of hunting, there shouldn't be people hunting on the property from that property. Whether or not people walk through, that's up to them, in terms of whether they post their land from the other side. But I mean, I would say, I would be super interested in the applicant developing, a four-phase plan and what that four-phase plan would look like. Because when we were on the sidewalk, one of the things I said is, well, what is in the first phase? Is the dump station in the first phase, or is that only gonna come in phase two? These are the things that we probably wanna know, in fact, that we do wanna know. And if we could deal with a permit for a smaller amount and to feel comfortable that it's not going to be as dramatically impactful as that looks, I think we would be far more inclined to cooperate, to be, more lenient, more receptive to the wait and see attitude than we would if it's 300.
So I guess before we proceed, we need to hear from you what we can actually, what would be accepted in this town before we proceed. Correct?
Well, I think 300, I mean, under the ordinance, I think we could figure out conditions to do 300. It's just, I think it's more, we'd be more receptive to a smaller one because we wouldn't have the concerns of magnitude, you know.
I have a question relative to that density, David, from the, conditions in the land use ordinance. It says, this is Article 10, performance standards for specific, activities and land uses, 10.4 under campgrounds. A, areas containing water carried sewage facilities. RV tent or shelter site shall contain a minimum of 5,000 square feet, not including roads and driveways. I did a calculation, if it's right, you know, calculating square feet to acreage, that's like 11% of an acre. Now, areas without water carried sewage facilities, like a tent site, shall contain a minimum of 20,000 square feet. That's 46% of an acre. And I'm just wondering if, you know, this like 10% of an acre and 0.5% of an acre is actually reflected in the size of all the campsites on there.
First of all, the term water carried facilities is a term that is in the state application for campgrounds. So that would be, so you're talking about the other option is primitive sites. So primitive sites are way out, they're beyond 500 feet from a bathroom. Basically folks don't have access to, you know, a reasonable access to bathroom or running water or those kind of things. So all of these sites are water carried facilities, or serviced by water care facilities. So it would be the one per 5,000, which in discussion with, the code enforcement officer at the beginning, that's a density calculation. That said, where our sites are, we certainly can cordon off 5,000 square feet each. You know, these sites are, I mean, this might be 300 acres out here, and we have 300 sites. So what's required on each site is a parking spot, a fire pit, and a picnic table. So that'll be on each site. And these sites are 65 to 75 feet apart. And to the total number, like you mentioned, one of the board members, we did show kind of a max development, and this shows a site every 75 feet, give or take. Some of these areas have high bedrock and really aren't realistic. What we wanted to do was permit the maximum possible, you know, really for stormwater perspective from DOT and from a potential traffic perspective. So, you know, even though we say 300, you know, maybe there's 250 here, you know.
And to follow up what he's saying, the other day digging the test pits with the soil scientist, on that upper loop right there, it was all ledge. So it doesn't follow the criteria for the runoff in the buffer zones. So we're gonna lose a lot of that site.
Yeah, so we're looking, really, when we're designing things, we look at worst case. You know, and engineers like to have factors of safety kind of built into things. So that's where all the calculations from traffic to stormwater, you know, are based with a factor of safety in mind. Doesn't mean that it's not impactful to your roadway, and all, those are very real concerns, and we understand that.
But if anybody's been out through Deacon Road and up through there and seen the layout, there's huge boulders that actually where a campsite is shown on the plan. It was just a mathematical equation to come up with a site, and we were told in the beginning to ask for.
Yeah, no, you were, I'd rather know what we're talking about and then talk about, yeah, I'd rather know what we're talking about than to say, oh, another campsite, oh, it's just one more campsite, like, no, we did exactly what we asked, no question about it, no.
I think the big point is, I mean, as far as we're all concerned, and this is my opinion, but as far as we're all concerned, if they have an issue with the DEP, it's not gonna, the town's not gonna incur any cost, because it's really nothing to do with us. It has to be done correctly, they're gonna do it correctly, I mean, they hire engineers, they're gonna do it correctly. The DOT is really what we should all be concerned about, because, that's obviously gonna cost somebody money at some point, and it's gonna really impact us site somewhere, I mean, okay, that's one's, you're down to 299, and they find 50 more places that they can't put sites, it's all of a sudden the max of a 250 site campground. So, I mean, we really don't have control over that, and we really shouldn't really be concerned about it, it's more of the traffic issue.
So you got your hands up. 9:34. I think both of you will be here next time.
Yep, depends when you have it,
These are fun. So I'd like to entertain a motion to continue the public hearing to the next regularly scheduled planning board meeting, which is the second Thursday in January, which I do not know the date.
Motion given.
I guess if it's the 15th, but I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
January 9th.
You know, you love that.
I heard a motion, second, all those in favor? Unanimous. Hey, everybody, thank you for coming out. This is very lonely without you guys.